What is going on tonight, you guys? It is just after week 17 fantasy football. Actually, a couple days later. Heading into week 18 fantasy football. It's obviously the last weird week where I took a poll recently from my audience and I was asking, how many of you played fantasy football to week 18? And about 20% of people voted I do. So, I think about 1,000 people voted in that. So, obviously some people are going into the fantasy football championship in this particular week. Most of us are not. So, if nothing else, I wanted to just get on here, kind of put a bow around this whole season, and had to close it out with something that I've been doing all year, and it's a part of this brand. It's what I do every week, what I got right, what I got wrong in the fantasy championship week. So, like I said, this may or may not be the last post of the fantasy season. Not only am I sick right now, but I have a funeral that I'm going to here at the end of the week. So I'm going to be traveling out of town for that funeral for most of the week. It is my grandfather, as I was discussing a couple weeks ago. So, I may or may not have some time to put up some videos for week 18. I would love to. If nothing else, if you are needing week 18 fantasy football content, I will have rankings posted for week 18 fantasy football on my Patreon. And I can drop my Patreon link in the description. It's actually already in the description. I'm going to put it in the chat below as well, just in case you guys do want to check out the Patreon. Because like I said, week 18 rankings will be up there. I just may or may not have time to put those videos up this week. So what I got right, what I got wrong. Nate Dogg, what's going on? Good to see you in here. Gonna get started. So go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. And let's just go ahead and get right into it. Live creation. What's going on, my man? This is a long time FFN guy right here. Live creation has been with me since I had less than 1,000 subscribers. Live creation, you're the man. What's up, Brian? Got 5 championship wins this week. Got 7 more chances to win in ESPN leagues. Let's go. I love to see that live creation. So glad that you made it through this season and you're crushing it. I mean, it's fantastic. I'm coming off a few fantasy championships myself in some redraft leagues. I lost in my dynasty league by 8 points and won a couple redraft leagues. So it's always good to win. Like I said, we'll try to have some week 18 content out to you guys, but I'm not only am I sick, but I will be traveling to Pennsylvania for a funeral, for my grandfather's funeral. So I will be out of commission for a little bit, for most of the week probably. But either way, we're getting into what I got right, what I got wrong in week 17 fantasy football. So the first part of this is obviously, I start this out, I started out every week basically the same way. It's got to be defense related. The defense has become such a big, piece of this channel. It's become so much part of my brand as a channel. And since this is the last what I got right and what I got wrong live stream of the year, I just have to break it down entirely. I'm not going to put a time restraint on this one. Usually I like to keep this live stream about 30 to 45 minutes. I don't care right now. I'm just going to go. Complete transparency today. Defense is so easy for me to evaluate because I love the game of football. I think what I've found, without calling out names, in the fantasy football community is YouTubers who put out fantasy football content who I think don't really care about defense. All they care about is the offense. So they tune out whenever it's like, well, I have Bijan Robinson of the Falcons, and I've got nobody else in this matchup. So I'm just going to tune out when he's not on the field. For me, it's not about that. It's about enjoying the game itself. That's why evaluating defense is so easy for me. And so I made some good calls this week. Rebounded off a bad week last week. Ravens was a more bold call that I heard during the week. The Ravens defense was a very, very bold call I had during the week, and it was actually highly contested. by a lot of my audience. And I can understand why. I mean, they were going up against one of the top scoring offenses in the league for the whole season. They were also going up against, a very explosive offense. There's a couple reasons I gave for it, though. Number one, they were missing Jalen Waddle. That's a very explosive piece on that offense they were missing. Number two, they were missing Raheem Mostert. Another very explosive piece on that offense. And by the way, they're clear number 2 threat in the offense this year. And that's not a slight to him. He's been excellent this year. So when I knew that was going to be the case this week, and I had seen the Ravens just absolutely steamroll the 49ers. It's ridiculous that I hadn't had the Ravens higher ranked really more throughout this season. So I knew I had to put them inside of my top 3 this past week because I was like, okay, listen, this game's in Baltimore. It's a must win for Baltimore to get the number 1 seed. They've been steamrolling top tier opponents. And now they're taking on a Miami Dolphins offense that not only, I've been saying this all year, this offense is not good against physical defenses. Look at all the losses they've lost, all the games they've lost this year. It's against physical defenses. Buffalo, Kansas City. I mean, there's a lot more examples. So the Ravens defense to me was a smash play. And because also they were missing, like I said earlier, Jalen Waddle and Raheem Mostert. So it just made a lot of sense. The Browns defense, I felt like it was a pretty obvious one. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the Browns defense because I felt like, honestly, that was a pretty obvious one. I mean, they were playing the Jets and playoff berth on the line. Jets had not squat to play for. It just there wasn't really much there for the Jets on the line this past week. And another one that I got really right was the Eagles defense. Now, the Eagles defense, they're a defense that I was asked consistently about this past week. Why aren't the Eagles defense higher? What's the deal? And it's like, I can understand the questions because when you got a matchup that's that good, right? The matchup that they had against the Cardinals, on paper, a very good matchup. I'm not going to argue about that one. I'm totally with that. But what I kept saying, and I've been saying this for over a month at this point, the Eagles defense is simply not good. Not just like not good, they're actually gross. They are. Their secondary is like, it's a Swiss cheese. I mean, that's what it is. It is so easy to cut through that secondary. Their defense just looks soft and worn down. Not only did Philadelphia lose the game, but their defense, let me put this in perspective. Philadelphia's defense had a defensive touchdown in that game, a 99-yard interception return for a touchdown. And they didn't even crack 10 points in fantasy football. Let that sink in. That's hard to do. Very, very hard to do. Philadelphia's defense is just not good. So I don't really care what the matchup is. Philadelphia's defense just flat out, it really hasn't been good all season. Now, as I just said, there's obviously a lot of interest for me to watch defenses, and it makes it easy for me to evaluate defenses as opposed to other fantasy football YouTubers, I believe. Does that mean I'm perfect? No. That's what this segment is for. That's what I got right and what I got wrong is for. And there was 2 defenses in particular that stood out to me. The Jacksonville Jaguars defense, I mean, my logic behind them. So first of all, Jacksonville's defense crushed it this week. I mean, they shut out Carolina. Bryce Young left the game like it was just not competitive at all. Jacksonville crushed them. I mean, they steamrolled them. And it's like I'm not surprised that it happened, but my logic behind it was that Jacksonville's defense is atrocious. And Carolina just put up 25 points on the Packers defense a week before that. And everybody wanted to rank Green Bay's defense super high. And I was cautious about it. I was like, I'm not going to do that. Jacksonville was left outside of my top 12 this week. And, I don't think that I took into account just how checked out the Panthers were. I mean, I watched that game actually today. And I mean, even if Bryce had stayed in, that whole team looked like they didn't give a shit. And obviously, I think the big news is that the owner, David Tepper, he threw a drink on some fan. And it's like, well, that's already not a good look. That's already not a good look for you or the organization. But I think it just highlights the dysfunction of Carolina. So I should have seen that one and at least ranked Jacksonville's defense inside the top 12 because they were great. And the other defense, I mean, this one cost me dearly. Like, this one cost me a championship. The Seahawks defense. I mean, they were unbelievably atrocious. And especially coming from someone who has watched the Steelers since I can remember being alive, right? Like, the Steelers, like I said, I'm going to a funeral in Pennsylvania this week. It's actually in Pittsburgh, and because I've got family blood ties to the Pittsburgh area. So, Yinzer runs in my blood. But I always say my fantasy football analysis comes first. But I also say that my knowledge about the Steelers for so many years gives me what I think usually is a leg up when it comes to evaluating Steelers. And I said, listen, this team, starting Mason Rudolph week 2, going to Seattle cross country. The Steelers, first of all, don't have a good history traveling to the West Coast. They just don't. So I was like, okay, I already like the scenario here of Seattle's defense getting a turnover or two and probably shutting them out to like 10 points. What I should have remembered, honestly, is, and I say this a lot, the Steelers are not very well coached. And obviously, I know I'm going to get pushback after saying that. When I say this after 2 straight 30-plus point performances, I know I'm going to get pushback saying that. I get that. And listen, I'm not calling Tomlin a bad coach. Tomlin, I do think, is a good coach. I just think that Tomlin's message has worn dry in the Pittsburgh Steelers building. And that's why you see the Steelers year after year after year after year after year. 9-8, 9-8, 9-8, 8-8, 9-8, 8-8, 8-8, 1. This team is a 500 team because they're motivated by never letting Tomlin have a losing season. That's why they played their butt off the past 2 games. Because that's what they're motivated by. And as a Steelers fan, it's irritating for me because I grew up watching championships. So as an outside fan, I can understand, like, listening to someone like me talk and being like, you're crazy. I understand it. And especially, like I said, after the past 2 weeks. The only reason I'm saying it right now is because I should have seen it coming. I should have seen it coming because Tomlin's record was on the line. Seattle was just an embarrassing call by me. Absolutely embarrassing. So, yeah, that's a tough one for sure. Now, the next 2 that I'm going through, these 2 guys right here, they're more season long. Not necessarily week 17. And I've talked about this guy that I was right on for a long time. I mean, he has been on a lot of these videos. And I'm going to keep doing it because I was very, very early on Jaden Reed of the Green Bay Packers. Jaden Reed has I was looking at it this morning. So do you want to know the top 3 rookie wide receivers in the totality of the fantasy football season this year? I'll show you the top 3 or 4, I think. Number 1 was Puka Nacua. In half PPR, he was the wide receiver 6. Rashee Rice was the wide receiver 2. He was the wide receiver 22 in half PPR. Jordan Addison, number 3, wide receiver 23, right behind Rashee Rice. And then there's Mr. Jaden Reed at wide receiver 25, above Zay Flowers. Because Jaden Reed had more explosive games, it was actually more consistent than Zay Flowers was. And that's no slight to Zay Flowers. I really like Zay Flowers. I think Zay Flowers is a great player. And in fact, there's a lot of guys that I think are going to come out next year and be great. Jackson Smith-Njigba, a player I was so in on during the offseason, really has hit his stride the past 2 months. And I think goes into next year a much better fantasy option. But Jaden Reed has been low-key just consistently awesome. And he was almost responsible for leading me back to a fantasy championship in my dynasty league. I mean, he was so close to getting me there until he got ruled out, which, by the way, he didn't play all of the second half on Sunday night against the Vikings. And he had like 25 plus points in a full PPR league. He was excellent. Jaden Reed was so great this year. And again, this one, the reason I keep talking about it is because every offseason, and you're going to see it again this offseason, I go through and I do film breakdowns on a lot of prospects in the particular rookie class coming up. Now, I used to put those videos on YouTube. I got in trouble for doing that. So now they're on Patreon. Jaden Reed, Tank Dell, Josh Downs. Those are guys that I found and was ranking higher than consensus because of the film breakdowns that I do. So if you want film breakdowns and if you want to get the edge, join the Patreon because I will be putting those out there. And this guy, I was just so wrong on this guy, man. I was so wrong on him from the beginning. This guy right here, I was really, I mean, in my own little world, was leading the charge on saying that this guy was just a terrible pick in fantasy drafts this year. Boy, was I wrong. And I'm glad that a lot of my audience seemed to have Rachaad White. Rachaad White has been excellent in fantasy this year. There's just no getting around it at this point. If your season ended on Sunday, Rachaad White was running back 5 in half PPR. Rachaad White was a baller this year. Now, it's actually kind of an interesting year with running backs. The gap between 1, McCaffrey, and 2, Mostert, is so ridiculously wide. And you're going to see me go through that during the offseason. So stay tuned for my offseason videos as well, because I'm going to get into recaps and what we can expect moving forward. But, you know, Rachaad White, there's just no question, has exceeded my expectations. And I keep saying this. It really does blow my mind. I can't fully wrap my head around it until I actually sit down and really look at Rachaad White's totality of his season after the season's over. Because Rachaad White, efficiency-wise, was just not very good. 3.6 yards per carry. And he's the running back 5. And he had 6 rushing touchdowns. Like, it just doesn't add up to me. But of course, like I said, I will be going through and assessing exactly why that is during the offseason. But no doubt, Rachaad White was just, ugh. I mean, I had a bad call on that one. And I'm glad that y'all had him because you guys would have missed out on a really good fantasy player like I did because I didn't draft him anywhere because I thought he was going to be such a bad pick. You guys were right. Congrats on you guys who had Rachaad White because I was wrong and you were definitely right. Now, we're back into week 17. These two guys right here, well, actually, this guy is week 17 related. I came into the week and I was saying to people, you know, one of the most asked about guys before Mostert was ruled out, and I was getting asked a ton about Achane like an hour before kickoff on Sunday, was Isaiah Pacheco. You know, what do we do if he plays? Do we play him? You know, do we sit him for, you know, Tony Pollard or you know, Zeke or something like that, Ty Chandler? And I was like, no, you can't do that, man. Like, Isaiah Pacheco, the thing to notice about him is that if you look at what the games that Pacheco has missed over the past month and how it correlates with the Chiefs' offense and what games they're winning and losing, there's a strong correlation there to Pacheco's absence and Chiefs losing ball games and not putting up points offensively. That's because Pacheco is and he's not only what I've called the second weapon in this offense. I think he's actually quickly becoming, not quickly necessarily, he's slowly becoming their number one. I mean, I've been on this for literally, you can go back to July offseason video where I said Travis Kelce is going to be a bad pick in fantasy drafts this year. And I was so right about that one. And I called that one last week, so I won't double dip in that one. But, you know, Pacheco to me, it was like, you got to play him if he plays because they need this guy. And he ended up having a fantastic week last week. And it was against the Raiders. No, I'm sorry, not against the Raiders. It was against the Bengals. And I said it, the Bengals are a great matchup. They were. The Bengals have been getting run all over lately. So Pacheco was always a pretty easy play for me, to be honest. I kind of saw that one for a while. So yeah, Pacheco, I really think that he's actually a pretty easy one to predict. For the entirety of the season. And obviously we'll see what happens next year, but I would imagine that this Chiefs offense is going to look a lot differently next year. And by the way, guys, whether or not this is my last piece of content on YouTube of the fantasy football season, after week 18, I will take a 1-week absence, and then I would be back starting up with off-season content. And I will be creating a separate channel for Dynasty exclusive content because I'm a big Dynasty guy as well. But I will be producing content for both channels during the off-season. And one of my first videos of the off-season is going to be a reaction video of me live reacting to some of my best and worst takes of the 2023 fantasy season. So you guys will want to stay tuned for that one. It's going to be fun. It's going to be really funny. And there's going to be a lot of off-season activity, guys. So go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Let's get into the last thing. Now, this guy, again, this is not week 18 related. This is the entirety of the year. You can go back to a lot of my off-season videos and find you can find Alexander Madison's picture in a lot of my thumbnails on the videos. I was so big on Madison heading into the season. And it was for a lot of reasons. You know, when I looked at Madison when he was actually the starter, Madison was efficient. He was a good pass catcher, and he got in the end zone, and he handled a workload. That has so not been the case this year for Madison. I mean, he's been an absolute bust, and he was a bust this year. He was a total bust this year. And like I said, I thought he legitimately had top 10 upside this year. Madison has been just a train wreck. I mean, and I drafted him in a couple redraft leagues and a couple best ball leagues. And you know, some of the best ball leagues I ended up doing well in with him, only because I had guys like James Cook in later rounds and Pacheco in later rounds, Kareem Hunt, to help carry his weight that he didn't carry because he was atrocious. Alexander Madison was just such a bump. And really, I don't think it's all on him. I really don't. I really don't think it's all on him. I think that, sorry guys, still a little sick. But I really don't think it's all on him. I don't think it's all his fault because I just think that it's unfortunately just a product of the offense he's in. As I've been saying all year, like this guy, like the way the Vikings run their offense is it's so much like the Eagles did this year, and is like they would just abandon the run game. And it was like for a long time, and it was like they didn't, it's not like they had Kirk Cousins for even more than half a season. Like they just abandoned the run game for the whole year. So I don't think it was all on Madison because even when Ty Chandler these past few weeks got the majority of the carries, like they weren't even doing it with him either. They did it 1 week and he played really well. But that was it. Madison was a bad call. There's no questions about it. And that is my final what I got right and what I got wrong video of the 2023 fantasy football season. So I'm going to open this up, chat with you guys for a little bit, see how you guys are doing. Like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. And again, join the Patreon. Join the Patreon, guys. I rely on your support. I do not have corporate backing. And you guys are going to get exclusive off-season content as well by joining the Patreon. You're going to help support the channel, support me to continue to bring better content for the next season. And again, you're going to see me produce another Dynasty channel that's separate from Football Fanalysts Network. It will still be me producing the content. It's going to be Dynasty exclusive, though. But you're going to consistently see me post on this channel 2 to 3 videos a week for the next several months. Now, after week 18, I'm going to go on a 1-week vacation. Won't post, but then after that, I will be back posting 2 to 3 times a week for a couple months. Just going over the offseason, going over what's prepared for next, discussing things like that. So you guys are going to see lots of offseason content. If you're interested, stick around. Love you guys either way. It's been a great season. And I'm just blessed to have you guys here, for sure. Blessed big time, for sure. And lots of good stuff coming up, for sure. So please go down there, support me any way you can. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join the Patreon. So Grassy FPS, I want to address your super chat real quick. Shout out to you, bro. I won my chip. 170 points PPR. Let's go. Let's go, man. I'm so happy to hear that. Honestly, guys, and again, this is my last what I got right and what I got wrong of 2023 fantasy football. We're obviously in 2024. By the way, Happy New Year, guys. I don't think I've said that yet. Happy New Year to all y'all. But this is my last what I got right and wrong of the fantasy season. And so I'm not holding anything back. I've been playing fantasy for over a decade now, and I've won now with the 3 that I won this year. I've won 32, I think 31 or 32 championships during that time. So I've won so many that it's like, of course, it's still fun to win. Like it's always fun to win, and I'll always play fantasy football because it's just awesome, and it's a good way for me to keep myself honest as well when I'm providing content for you guys to win. But it's also like I get more joy out of seeing my audience kick butt and win their championships. So it's actually really fun for me to see when you guys tell me that you won. So I'm glad to see that you won, man. I appreciate you, Grassy. I know you're a supporter of the Patreon as well, so I appreciate your support. I'll be here all off season. You know where to find me. And again, stay tuned for the Dynasty channel if you guys play Dynasty. And again, stay tuned on this channel as well. Going to be posting 2 to 3 videos a week for the next several months, aside from after this upcoming week where I will take a week off. But again, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the super chat. Let's see a couple more comments that you guys are saying, and I'm going to go ahead and sign off because I'm definitely still dealing with the sickness, guys. Nate Dog, I sent you a question on Patreon. Will you be able to answer my question tonight? Yeah, of course I will. Yeah, I will be answering the question tonight. Yeah, I'll definitely be on Patreon tonight answering questions as well. From anybody else who's a patron and has questions as well, feel free to DM me. That's the thing about Patreon is if you're a supporter, then you get direct access to my DMs. So you can DM me at any time. I'm going to reply as soon as I can. But I will be on tonight answering questions. Jay Santiago got 3rd place, man, in no small part thanks to your advice. Much appreciation to you. I had most points in my fantasy season, just a bit unlucky with matchups. Yeah, man. It's that's always the worst thing is when you're just crushing it, right? Like all season long, and it's like, oh, this is my year. And then it's like, it's so funny because a lot of my fantasy championships that I've won over the years, I just want to say this as an anecdote, especially lately, as I've gotten into more competitive leagues, as I've gone on. The more and more I've gotten into fantasy football, the more competitive leagues I'm in. Early on, when I was playing back in the early 2010s, it was like I was blowing out a lot of leagues. Like I was just crushing it. But as time goes on, I got into more competitive leagues. And so what I would find myself in a lot of times was if I was in like a 10 or 12 team league, I would be in a situation where I would be like on the fringe of like being out of the playoffs. And I would need to win and in for the playoffs and go on a run because I wouldn't get a bye week. And a lot of the fantasy championships that I've won over the past 3 years, 4 years specifically, is when I'm like the fifth or 6th or 7th seed. And I go and I get hot. And I go on a run. It's interesting. It is interesting. Because it's more of a mental thing for me because it's like you can get the way I like to play is that if I've been rocking with a guy all year and he was crushing it for me early, there's a lot of people who have the inclination and they feel that obligation almost to basically keep that player and keep playing him. For me, I'm like, if you're not doing well for me, I'm going to drop you and play someone else or just put you on my bench. That's why I look at fantasy football in terms of 4 quarters of a season. Because one guy that may have done well for you in quarter 1 may not be doing a thing for you in quarter 3 or 4. So you got to make moves accordingly. So I think that a lot of what I have found over the last several years of playing fantasy is that a lot of these guys who were first, second place have had just a all around like star-studded team, like that is just starting to underperform at the wrong time. And they find it hard to be able to bench or move on from a player and play another guy. So it's not that I'm ever shooting for like the fringe playoff spot, but I will say that a lot of my fantasy championships, like I've said over the years, has come from that. So not saying that that's your path, Jay Santiago, but I do think that, with more time, I think you'll be definitely getting some championships under your belt. So it's good to see you in here tonight for sure. Nate Dogg, thank you. You got it, my brother. You got it. I will be on Patreon pretty soon after I get off the live stream. RJ Bacani got third. Seriously, couldn't have done it without all y'all. Well, that's awesome because it's not only addressing me, it's addressing the whole community. I mean, that's fantastic. Like, honestly, I think everybody in this chat right now should acknowledge how sweet that is. Like, to hear that, like, someone else in our community that we have built at Football Fanalysts Network is giving credit to the community, not just me, the community, for making calls. Because that's the thing. It's like, I say this a lot too on live streams specifically. When I see sometimes in a live chat where it's like, oh, you only answered paid questions. It's like, well, no, that's not true. Number one, because I answer questions free on YouTube videos all the time. All the time. I mean, I don't answer all of them. I've grown to a size on this channel to where it's getting harder and harder for me to answer every single comment. But I answer as many as I can, regardless if you pay or not. But number two is, of course, I'm going to prioritize paid questions because it's helping me forward advance this channel, create better content for you guys in the future, upgrade the studio, get the light, everything else. So, of course, that's going to be the case. But the point is that sometimes when I'm not able to answer questions, I notice that the community, the chat, helps each other out. And there's nothing I love more to see that, because it shows me that we've created a strong community. Again, not just me, us. So RJ Bacani, appreciate seeing that, because it's pretty sweet to see that all of us everybody in the chat was acknowledged as well. Anthony won the championship for the first time. Thanks for all the help this year. That's awesome. Again, that's fantastic. Love to see it. Like I said, we'll be here all offseason, addressing the first part of the offseason. Will be addressing kind of rehashing and reassessing what happened this past year, and then we'll be full preparing for the next season. So again, lots of content coming up here, not going anywhere. Going to continue to build this channel piece by piece, and going to continue to grow to become one of the top fantasy channels on YouTube. And that doesn't happen without y'all's support. So again, support me any way you can. If you do appreciate my work, like the video, subscribe to the channel, join the Patreon as well. So guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for the night. Again, thank y'all so much for being here tonight. It was great to be here with y'all tonight. Like I said, I'm going to try to put out some Week 18 videos, but I can't promise that I will. We'll be traveling here soon, going out of town for a funeral, and I'm sick as well. So it's a little bit of a hectic week for me. So regardless, though, if you do need Week 18 content, I can promise you this, it will be on Patreon. Week 18 will have rankings on Patreon, not videos. The videos will not be on Patreon. The rankings will be on Patreon. So if you do need Week 18 content, Patreon's a good way to get it for sure. But either way, love you guys. It's great to see y'all. If it's the last time I see y'all for a little bit, just know that it's been a great ride, and I'll be here all off season if you want to come back and watch some fantasy football. And I'm going to be here all off season, prepare for the next season, and we're going to continue to dominate fantasy together. So love you guys. Peace out. Talk to y'all later.